said one word wrong at the American supermarket, and the entire checkout line went silent. The cashier stared at me. The person behind me stepped back. I had no idea I just said something very inappropriate in English. Here is what happened, and the 10 phrases that will save you from the same mistake. It was a typical Saturday afternoon in Portland, Oregon. The sky was gray and cloudy, which is normal for this city in the fall. I pulled into the supermarket parking lot at around 2 in the afternoon, which turned out to be the worst possible time. The place was absolutely packed with weekend shoppers. Every parking spot near the entrance was taken. I had to drive around for nearly 5 minutes before finally finding a space at the far end of the lot. As I walked toward the entrance, and I could already see through the glass doors that the store was crowded. Families with kids running around, elderly couples moving slowly with their carts, and stressed college students grabbing last-minute ingredients for dinner parties. There was a constant buzz of activity. Shopping carts clattered, and somewhere in the background, the store radio was playing a soft pop song. I had been living in the United States for only 3 months, and my English was at a 2 level. I could have basic conversations, order food at restaurants, and ask for directions, but I was still learning the small details that make a language sound natural. Grammar rules, pronunciation, idioms, slang, all of these were still challenging for me. But I was determined to improve. Every interaction was a chance to practice. That day, and I needed to buy groceries for the week. Nothing complicated, just milk, bread, eggs, some vegetables, and maybe a few snacks. I had written a shopping list on my phone in English to practice the vocabulary. I felt confident. After all, I had been to the supermarket twice before, and both times went smoothly. The first time, I used the self-checkout machine. The second time, I went through a regular checkout lane, and the cashier was patient and friendly. Today, I told myself, would be just as easy. I grabbed a shopping cart at the entrance, wiping the handle with a sanitizing wipe from the dispenser near the door. I checked my list one more time, took a deep breath, and walked into the produce section. The fluorescent lights were bright and slightly harsh. The smell of fresh produce filled the air, earthy, slightly sweet, and clean. The first stop was the vegetable aisle. The produce section in this supermarket was huge, with rows of colorful fruits and vegetables displayed in neat piles and bins. I needed tomatoes, cucumbers, and lettuce for salads. I started with the tomatoes. There were so many different kinds: cherry tomatoes, Roma tomatoes, beefsteak tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes. I stood there for a moment, slightly overwhelmed. Finally, I decided to go with the classic round red tomatoes in a large bin. I picked up 3 large tomatoes and examined them carefully, the way I had seen other shoppers do. I gently squeezed each one to check for firmness. They looked fresh, with smooth skin and a deep red color. Perfect. I placed them gently in a plastic bag and put them in my cart. Next were the cucumbers. I found a nice pile of dark green ones and selected 2. Then I put them in another plastic bag and added them to my cart. As I was reaching for the lettuce, an employee walked by and smiled at me. She was a young woman wearing a green apron with the store logo. She said something quickly, but I only caught the word help. I smiled back and said, "No, thank you. I am okay." She nodded and continued walking. That small exchange made me feel proud. I understood her question and responded correctly. My confidence grew. I moved to the fruit section. Apples, bananas, and oranges were on my list. I picked up a bunch of slightly green bananas. I preferred them that way because they would last longer. I placed them in my cart without a bag. Then, I grabbed a bag of red apples on sale, 3 pounds for $5. A good deal. An American woman next to me was inspecting each apple carefully. She looked at me and said, "These apples are really good this week." I smiled and said, "Yes, very good." She smiled and walked away. Another successful interaction. After the produce section, I headed to the dairy aisle. I passed the bakery where the smell of fresh bread filled the air. It was warm and comforting. I needed milk and yogurt. The milk section was overwhelming. There were so many options: whole milk, 2% milk, 1% milk, skim milk, almond milk, oat milk, soy milk, lactose-free milk, coconut milk. Each type came in different sizes. Some were organic, some were grass-fed. I stood there for a moment, staring at the shelves, trying to remember which one I usually bought. In my home country, we just had regular milk. But here in America, choosing milk felt like taking a test. Finally, I grabbed a half-gallon of 2% milk. It was the safest choice. Next to the milk was the yogurt section, which was equally confusing. Greek yogurt, regular yogurt, low-fat yogurt, non-fat yogurt, yogurt with fruit, yogurt with honey, yogurt with granola. The options seemed endless. I picked a simple container of plain Greek yogurt. I had learned that Greek yogurt was thicker and had more protein. I put it in my cart and moved on. The bread aisle was next. I needed a loaf of whole wheat bread. I walked past the white bread, the sourdough, the rye bread, and finally found the whole wheat section. I picked up a loaf labeled 100% whole wheat and checked the date. It was good for another week. Perfect. I placed it carefully in my cart. By this point, my cart was starting to fill up, and I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had successfully navigated most of the store without any problems. I decided to grab a few snacks before heading to the checkout. I walked down the snack aisle and picked up a bag of tortilla chips. Then, I grabbed a jar of salsa to go with them. I also grabbed a chocolate bar as a treat for myself. Finally, it was time to check out. I pushed my cart toward the front of the store where the checkout lanes were located. I looked at the rows of registers and saw that most of them had long lines. This was expected on a Saturday afternoon. Everyone was doing their weekend shopping at the same time. I scanned the lanes carefully, trying to determine which one would move the fastest. I chose lane number 7. There were 3 people ahead of me. Yes, I pushed my cart into the queue and positioned myself behind a tall man wearing a baseball cap. He was buying what looked like ingredients for a barbecue. In front of him was a woman with a toddler sitting in the front part of her cart. The child was holding a stuffed animal. In front of her was an elderly man with just a few items, a newspaper, orange juice, and cereal. I waited patiently, scrolling through my phone to pass the time. I checked my messages and read an article about learning English. After a few minutes, the elderly man finished and left. The woman with the toddler moved forward. I watched as the cashier scanned each of her items, chatting with her in a friendly manner. The toddler reached out and tried to grab a candy bar from the display. The mother gently moved his hand away. The cashier smiled and said something that made the mother laugh. It was such a normal, everyday interaction. I envied how easily they communicated. Finally, the man in the baseball cap finished. He paid with his credit card and grabbed his bags. Now it was my turn. I pushed my cart forward and started placing my items on the conveyor belt. I carefully arranged them in a logical order, heavier items first, then lighter items, and finally the bread on top so it would not get crushed. I had watched other people do this, and I wanted to follow the same system. As I was unloading my cart, I glanced at the cashier. She was a middle-aged woman with short blonde hair and glasses. She wore a name tag that said, Linda. She had a kind face and looked like someone who had been working at this supermarket for many years. She greeted me with a polite smile and said, "Hi, how are you today?" Her voice was warm and friendly. I responded, "I am good, thank you. How are you?" I made sure to speak clearly and make eye contact. She said, "I'm doing well, thanks." So far, so good. She began scanning my items one by one. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of the scanner was rhythmic and strangely calming. I watched as each item passed through and appeared on the screen with its price. Tomatoes, $3.49. Cucumbers, $2.99. Apples, $5. Milk, $4.29. Tomatoes, $3.49. Cucumbers, $2.99. Apples, $5. Milk, $4.29. When she scanned the bananas, she paused and looked at me. She held them in her hand for a moment. Then she looked up and said, "Do you want a bag for these?" Her voice was neutral, just a standard question. It was such a simple question, a yes or no answer. Easy. I understood the question perfectly. She was asking if I wanted to put the bananas in a plastic bag. I knew that some people preferred to keep bananas loose, without a bag, because the peel already protects the fruit. I thought for a moment and decided that I did not need a bag. The bananas were fine as they were. In my mind, I wanted to say, "No, thank you. I do not need a bag." That is exactly what I intended to say. The sentence was clear in my head, simple, polite, correct. But here's where everything went terribly wrong. In my head, I was translating from my native language to English. I knew the word for bag. Or at least, I thought I did. I had heard people use the word sack before, especially in American English. In some regions, people say paper sack or grocery sack instead of bag. I had seen this word in old movies and TV shows. I thought it was a more casual, authentic American way to say bag. So, in an attempt to sound more fluent, I decided to use the word sack instead of bag. I looked directly at Linda, smiled confidently, and said, "No, thank you. I do not need to sack." The moment those words left my mouth, I knew something was wrong. The air in the checkout lane seemed to change. Everything suddenly felt heavier, tense, uncomfortable. Linda's smile disappeared instantly. Her eyes widened slightly. She froze for a second, still holding the bunch of bananas in her hand, as if time itself had stopped. Then she slowly placed them down on the counter and stared at me with a confused and slightly alarmed expression. I did not understand what happened. Why did she stop smiling? Why was she staring at me like that? I quickly replayed my sentence in my head. "No, thank you. I do not need to sack." It sounded correct to me. I used the word sack the same way people use bag. What could possibly be wrong with that? Then I noticed the person standing behind me in line. It was a woman in her 30s, wearing a puffy winter jacket and holding a shopping basket. She had been standing there casually, scrolling through her phone. But when I said that sentence, her head snapped up. She looked at me with wide eyes, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. She took a small step backward, away from me, and gave me a strange, almost frightened look. A man further back in the line also looked up. He had a thick beard and was wearing a flannel shirt. He stopped what he was doing and stared at me. Then he whispered something to the person next to him. They both glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The entire checkout area suddenly felt very quiet. The beeping of the scanner from the next lane seemed louder than before. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I felt like I was standing under a spotlight. Linda cleared her throat. It was a deliberate sound, like she was trying to reset the conversation. She leaned forward slightly and said, slowly, very slowly and carefully, "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Her tone was cautious, measured, as if she was not sure she heard me correctly and wanted to give me a chance to correct myself. My heart started beating faster. A wave of panic washed over me. My palms began to sweat. I was confused and deeply embarrassed. I had no idea what I said wrong, but clearly I had said something terrible. I tried to fix it. I thought maybe I had not been clear enough. So I repeated the sentence, hoping to clarify. I spoke a little louder this time, more confidently. "I do not need to sack. No bag. It is okay." Her face changed again. This time, she looked even more concerned. She said, very slowly and very clearly, "Sir, I think there might be a misunderstanding. Are you saying you do not want a bag for your bananas?" I nodded quickly, eagerly. "Yes, no bag. I do not need to sack." I repeated the sentence again, thinking that maybe if I said it one more time, she would finally understand. But instead of making things better, it made everything worse. Linda closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then she opened them and said, "I think you mean you do not need a bag. The word you are using, it does not mean what you think it means. It is not appropriate in this context." I felt my face turn red. My entire body felt hot. My stomach dropped. I had made a mistake, a big, terrible mistake, but I still did not understand exactly what I said wrong. All I knew was that everyone was staring at me, and I wanted to disappear. I stammered, my voice shaking. "I'm sorry. My English is not very good. I just mean, no bag. I am sorry." She nodded slowly, and her expression softened just a little. "Okay, no bag. Got it." She smiled a little, but it was not the same friendly smile from before. It was more of a polite, understanding smile. The kind of smile you give to someone who just made an innocent but terribly awkward mistake. She continued scanning the rest of my items in silence. The beeping resumed, but the atmosphere remained tense. Nobody spoke. I stood there, frozen, trying to figure out what I said wrong. My mind was racing. After what felt like an eternity, Linda finished scanning everything. She looked at the screen and said, "Your total is $42.35. I handed her my credit card without making eye contact. My hand was shaking slightly as I inserted the card into the reader. I punched in my PIN number, got it wrong the first time because my fingers were trembling, then tried again. Finally, the payment went through. She processed the transaction, printed the receipt, and handed it to me. I took it quickly, mumbling, "Thank you." As I was about to grab my bags and leave as fast as possible, she said quietly, almost under her breath, "By the way, just so you know for next time, the word you were trying to say is bag. Just bag. Not the other word you used. That word, well, it can mean something very different in certain contexts. Just be careful, okay?" I nodded quickly, my face burning with shame. "Okay, thank you. I am sorry." I grabbed my grocery bags, fumbling with them awkwardly, and walked toward the exit as fast as I could without actually running. I did not look at anyone. I kept my eyes on the floor, on the automatic doors ahead, on anything except the people around me. As I walked out into the parking lot, the cool air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. My heart was still pounding. My hands were still shaking. I felt humiliated and confused and frustrated. I loaded my groceries into the trunk of my car, got into the driver's seat, and just sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. What just happened? What did I say? I replayed the entire scene in my head over and over again. The look on Linda's face, the way the woman behind me stepped back, the whispers from the other customers. It was one of the most embarrassing moments of my entire life. When I got home, I parked in my apartment building's garage and sat in the car for another minute, trying to calm down. My hands had stopped shaking, but I still felt embarrassed. I grabbed the grocery bags and walked up to my second-floor apartment. Once inside, I put the groceries away quickly. The milk went in the fridge, the bread on the counter, the bananas in a bowl. Then, I immediately grabbed my laptop. I sat down on my couch and searched for the word sack in English. I needed to understand what went wrong. As I started reading through the definitions and examples, I slowly began to realize my mistake. The word sack can mean bag in some contexts, especially in older or regional American English. You might hear someone, particularly in rural or southern parts of the United States, say, "I need a sack for my groceries," and it would be perfectly normal. In fact, many older Americans still use this term without any issue. So technically, I was not completely wrong. The word sack as a noun can mean bag, but the way I used it in the phrase, "I do not need to sack," completely changed the meaning. I used sack as a verb, not as a noun, and the verb to sack means something entirely different. In British English, yes, to sack means to fire someone from their job. In American slang, to sack can also mean to tackle someone aggressively in American football. But even worse, in certain very informal, crude contexts, to sack can have an inappropriate anatomical meaning. When I said, "I do not need to sack," the cashier probably thought I was making a bizarre, possibly crude or even threatening statement. She had no idea I was just trying to say I did not need a plastic bag for my bananas. I sat there on my couch, staring at the screen, feeling my face flush all over again. I put my hands over my face and groaned. How could I have been so stupid? How could I not have known this? I thought I was being smart, using a more American-sounding word. Instead, I ended up saying something completely inappropriate in front of a store full of people. I felt terrible, embarrassed, ashamed, frustrated with myself. I sat there for a long time, replaying the whole scene in my head, the look on Linda's face, the way the person behind me stepped back, the whispers from other customers, the uncomfortable silence. It was one of the most humiliating moments of my entire life. But then, after wallowing in my embarrassment for a while, something shifted. I realized something important. This was not just an embarrassing moment. It was a critical learning moment. I had been living in the United States for 3 months, and I was still learning how to communicate correctly. Mistakes like this were inevitable. They were part of the process. The key was not to avoid mistakes entirely. That was impossible. The key was to learn from them and move forward. I decided right then that I would never make the same mistake again. I would stick to simple, safe words like bag until my English improved. But I also decided to go further. I wanted to master the language, so I started writing down all the grocery shopping phrases I should have used that day. Over the next few days, I researched common supermarket phrases on English learning websites. I watched YouTube videos of native English speakers shopping. I took notes. I practiced out loud in my apartment. After a week of preparation, I decided it was time to go back. I needed to face my fear. I needed redemption. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and the supermarket was less crowded. I walked in with my head held high, feeling nervous but determined. I grabbed a shopping cart and picked up a few items: milk, bread, apples, and yes, just a bunch of bananas. When I reached the checkout lanes, I chose one with a short line. The cashier was a young man with short, dark hair and a friendly smile. He greeted me with, "Hey, how's it going?" I responded, "Good, thanks. How about you?" He said, "Pretty good, just a slow day." He scanned everything quickly. When he picked up the bananas, he looked at me and asked, "Do you want a bag for these?" This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I looked him in the eye, smiled, and said clearly and confidently, "No, thank you. I do not need a bag." He smiled, nodded, and said, "Cool, no problem." Then he continued scanning. No awkward silence, no strange looks, no stepping back, no whispers, just a normal, smooth, successful interaction. When he finished, I paid with my card, and he handed me the receipt. "Have a great day," he said. "You too," I replied. I grabbed my groceries and walked out feeling like I had just won a championship. I did it. I communicated correctly. That experience taught me that language learning is about understanding context and nuance. A single word can have multiple meanings. But mistakes are not the end of the world. They are opportunities to learn. Now I shop at that supermarket regularly. I know what to expect. My English has improved, and shopping no longer feels stressful. But I will never forget that day. It reminds me that every mistake is a step closer to fluency. So let me now share with you the exact phrases that will help you avoid the same mistakes I made. These are the phrases that will make your supermarket experience smooth, easy, and stress-free. These are the phrases that will help you communicate clearly and confidently, no matter what situation you encounter. So let me share with you the 10 most important phrases you need to know when shopping at an American supermarket. First, when someone asks if you need help, say, "No, thank you, I am just looking." If you do need help, say, "Yes, actually. Can you help me find the bread?" Second, if you cannot find something, ask, "Excuse me, where can I find the milk?" Third, when the cashier asks, "Do you want a bag?" say, "Yes, please," or "No, thank you, I do not need a bag." Use the word bag, not sack, just bag. Fourth, if asked, "Do you have a rewards card?" say, "No, I do not have one," or "Yes, here it is." Fifth, when asked, "Will that be cash or card?" say, "I will pay with card," or "I will pay with cash." Sixth, if the price seems wrong, say, "Excuse me, I think there might be a mistake. Can you check the price of this item?" Seventh, if asked, "Do you need these weighed?" say, "Yes, please," or "No, thank you. They are already priced." Eighth, to return something, say, "Excuse me, I would like to return this item. I have the receipt." Ninth, to find the fastest line, ask, "Excuse me, which line is moving the fastest?" 10th, always end with "Thank you" or "Have a great day." These phrases will save you from confusion and embarrassment. After my mistake, I practiced them and now use them with confidence. No more awkward silences, no more strange looks, just smooth, easy shopping. That experience taught me something I will never forget. Language is not just about grammar rules or vocabulary lists. It is about understanding context, tone, and the small details that change everything. A single word can mean one thing as a noun and something completely different as a verb. And sometimes those differences can lead to the most embarrassing moments of your life. But here's what I learned. Mistakes are not failures. They are lessons. Every awkward moment, every misunderstanding, every time you feel your face turn red, those are the moments that make you better. They force you to pay attention, to practice harder, to never make the same mistake twice. So embrace your mistakes, learn from them, and keep moving forward. If this story helped you, or if you have ever made an embarrassing language mistake yourself, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Share your story. Let us learn from each other. And if you found these 10 phrases useful, please hit that like button. It really helps me create more content like this. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. I post new English learning content every week with real stories, practical phrases, and tips that actually work in real life. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Until then, keep practicing, stay confident, and remember, every mistake is just one step closer to fluency.